So welcome everybody. It's a real pleasure today to welcome Marc Wicks. Marc is our Director of Skills. And I'm not going to, like I would normally do with guests, give a sort of introduction about his background, because I know I won't do that justice. I'm going to let Marc introduce himself. And the linkage and conversation today is around coaching and military. And a lot of people, being ex-military myself, a lot of people have a perspective that the military is command and control. And I think, like a lot of workplaces, things have moved on. And I think the military are very much advanced in the way that they lead and coach, dare I say. And Marc and I are going to explore that. So, Marc, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you on this podcast.
It's wonderful to be here, Trayton, and thank you ever so much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my experiences, I suppose, and things that I've learned over the many years that I did very fortunately serve the way that I see it.
Yeah, and you served for over 30 years in the Royal Marines. So if you wouldn't mind just giving our audience an overview of that experience, and then that'll lead nicely into what you learned and how you're bringing that to the fore into the challenging workplace that we're all facing today.
Definitely. Well, thank you for, again, as I said, Trayton, 32 years ago, 1983, I joined the Royal Marines as a young local man, actually, and I was sort of brought into the Marines a lot quicker than I expected because I was local and somebody had actually dropped out of their sort of sign-up procedure, and I got a telephone call and it was like, can you be here on Wednesday? And it was, within a couple of weeks of actually sort of going into a careers office down in Plymouth after a sort of few telephone calls and that. So a bit of a baptism of fire for me. 32 years, Trayton, it passed so quickly for me because of the sort of amazing opportunities and experiences that I had. And I specialised within my time and services of physical training instructor within the Marines, and coaching was very much a part of that, enabling the young men at the time that were sort of joining up and serving to be the best that they possibly could be, and whether that was through physical prowess or whether that was with their mental ability and growth mindset. But I started off with 4-man teams, as a young section commander, right the way through to actually serving as the Supreme Ally Commander of NATO Transformation as his command senior enlisted leader. I was selected from the 28 nations to be his advisor and part of his 4-man command team in the United States of America. And previous to that, I served as what we refer to as the Corps Regimental Sergeant Major. So that means that I was the senior other rank, as we would refer to in the UK, but anybody, if they are listening from abroad, would understand it, that I was what they refer to as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader. So, that selection process was sort of long and rigorous. And, very fortunately, I was taken with myself and my family to join the Supreme Ally Commander over in the US in Norfolk, Virginia, and to work as one of his advisors as part of his command team. I was very much responsible for the transformation of the education and training of the NATO enlisted ranks, if that makes sense. So I had a lot of sort of diverse opportunities moving around the world and speaking to people within the different organizations that support NATO, that are members. And previous to that, I served with the United States Marine Corps for nearly 3 years as their physical training advisor. So that was part of my sort of specialization within the Marines as a physical training instructor, that I was then selected to go and represent the UK Royal Marines as part of the United States Marine Corps set up at the Officer Candidate School in Quantico. So my military career is fairly diverse. I've been a battle group RSM on operations, many different challenges, many austere situations, many sort of tough and memorable occasions as well. But the one thing that always sort of rings true for me is that sort of shared experience with the men that I worked with. And again, I unfortunately do say men, but it was men at the time that I served with, as females were not part of the Royal Marine Commanders, which very fortunately now they are. And, God bless them all. And I wish them all the very best with that. So that was my experience in service, really.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I hope all our listeners can just hear how impressive that is and the experience that you can bring, not just to the coaching world, but I think to the leadership world as well. And the conversations that we've had around this military connection with the coaching is very much about your role as the RSM and certainly that NATO level is to take that strategic direction which leaders should give and then execute and make that happen and enable individuals, units, brigades, countries to play their best game. So coaching at not just on an individual level, but what I would call an organizational level as well. So what are some of those core attributes that you've learned and you've noticed that help people, teams, organizations to play their best game and really deliver on the expectation objectives that leaders give them?
Well, I tell you what, Trayton, you're absolutely right. And for me, the simplicity of good communication, that shared knowledge with right the way down through the chain of command and checking that alignment exists within the organization. I was very much given a sort of clear role that I could spread the Supreme Allied Commander, the Corps Commandant General, their words. And I talked on behalf of them. Every time I spoke on behalf of them. But what I thought was really important for me was what I refer to as sort of battlefield rhythm. It's a bit like a sort of leadership by walkabout, where I used to put myself very much in the trenches, in the front line with those people, to first get an understanding of what they understood about what the intent was. What is it I'm here to achieve? Understand what we're doing, but more importantly, do they understand why they are doing it? And if they understand that why, and they're talking to me at that very sort of lowest level within the organization, that gives me a sort of very warm and fuzzy feeling that the communication from the commander right the way down through the chain of command has been delivered. And what I'd quite often find is that direction would sometimes been delivered, and I can go back to an incident in Afghanistan where we were told to use courageous restraint, at one point in our time. And then when I would go down and visit, and sort of somebody used to say, take Mark off the leash and let him go out there and go and find out what really is going on at the ground level. And I think that sort of shared experience with them. And when you hear that they're not aligned, they don't fully understand what the message is, and then that would be my role to be able to step in and to really clarify what it was that they needed to understand. But the conversations, Trayton, would be very much along the lines of, so what do you think that means to you? If we're talking about courageous restraint, talk to me about what you think that means. And then, the men that were serving would then come back with their different ideas, and I would be able to sort of clarify or give them a little bit more alignment, a bit more of a better understanding. So instead of me just going in with that one-way communication, it was really allowing me to understand what they felt it meant for them and how they could then perform to make that happen, to achieve the intent that was being pushed down. And, the chain of command, as we know, Trayton, depending on what level I was at in my career, it could have been as a corporal or a troop sergeant or a sergeant major, would be very much in the commando level. Whereas if it becomes the brigade, then I've then got, 6,500 to 7,000 men, 8,000 men sometimes that I'm then responsible for making sure that's happened. Well, yourself, if I take that out to the NATO place, how do I hit the 28 nations? How do I speak to all these people? Well, very much through, the training environment, the schools, and being present. So my role as an RSM or as a command senior enlisted leader was to be present, Trayton, to go and visit, to be on the ground, and then come back and convey what it was I was seeing, what I was hearing, what are they missing? And then the commander at the very senior level, through those different opportunities, could then look back and go, right, have I communicated clearly what I want to be achieved? Have I really thought about what the impact of what this is for those people down below? And I was that sort of messenger, that conduit in between.
Yeah,
and somebody said to me,
I really like that. I like that point of this communication two ways, and not just on a task level about the what and the why, but also on an empathetic level and understanding how that was landing, what that was meaning to individuals on a personal level, and then taking that data, that knowledge, that understanding, and presenting that back to your senior leader, so that they were able to then adjust the communication accordingly. And then, as you say, being present to do that, but also allowing that communication to resonate so that people would engage with it and fully understand it, not just in what, but why they were being asked to do that.
I think the other key piece within that, Drayton, is that I find, it's no good just spending that 20 minutes in, on the ground with the person. If I went to visit or sit with a unit, then I would spend time, a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, just to pick up that environment, pick up the atmosphere. What's the ambience? What's the, what am I feeling? And then what I would, people would come back and say, Mark, you tell the truth under Kings, that without fear or favour, it was, look, this is what's going on. This is what you need to do. So having that ability and trust from my senior leaders to be able to tell them, no, that's not what's happening on the ground. This is the way it really is. But just presenting that clear communication for them really enabled them to understand, where were they hitting the mark, or where were they missing the mark, or what were they not doing, and why were people not sort of achieving, to what they expected. And it may just have been that their clarity of intent was not good enough. And then they could readjust and say, do you know what? Yeah, we need to make sure we get out and push this information around. And that would be very much my job. I could pull in a team of sergeant majors, as you know, Trayton, across a commander unit, across the brigade. So I could communicate straight to them, and then they would then, this message would continue to be pushed down. And like I said, the easy start setting for me was go at the lowest level of the team and find out what they know. Because if they're not talking about it, it's not been communicated correctly.
So what I'm hearing here is basically you're an extension of the leader's ears and eyes, and taking all of that data and understanding the emotional elements, the elements that people are engaging with or not, as that might be, and then presenting that back to the leadership population for them to adjust the communication and the approach accordingly.
Definitely.
And how do you see that with your coaching experience now? How do you see that translating when you're working on a one-to-one basis, and all that great work you've done in empathizing and noticing what individuals are saying and doing? How does that show up when you're doing the one-to-one coaching?
Do you know what I really appreciate, that the coaching skill set that we talk about, training, and we talk about one of the key areas when we talk about the coach, the coachee, and the relationship. The relationship is really important for me, and that doesn't mean to say that I have to be the friend, but I have to have a good, strong, open, honest communication and relationship with that person. Because what that also does is it allows me, if I have that open communication with them, with a bit of understanding myself of the context that person is within, what bubble are they actually in at the moment? What's going on in Trayton's world, but what's going on in Trayton's organisation? What's going on in Trayton external to the organisation? Because all these things affect and impact the way that you show up. And I think what the military has enabled me to do is understand how to build this relationship with people, to understand not only the organisation I'm in, but very much the environment that I'm in, because of some of the environments that we have served in. What is the impact of this individual having upon that environment, or what is the impact that the environment is having on that individual, the coachee, if we talk about that now. And that helps you get a more holistic understanding and understand the sort of some of the pressures that the person may be under. And by helping them understand where they are, it helps them to understand sometimes why this may be the way that they're feeling, why they may not be able to, think slightly differently. And sometimes why they don't even believe in themselves, Trayton. What we're trying to do is give them that space and say, I believe you have more potential. And for me, within the military, and I say very much within the Royal Marines, I think we always had that. That was every person I knew that wore the green beret wore that beret because they had achieved exactly the same as I had achieved. There was no ambiguity in that. You either pass or you fail.
And so that
was a great, it's a common standard.
Yeah.
But then there was an ethos within the organization that, nothing was impossible. You ask a Marine, or most people in the military, this isn't impossible. This can be achieved through great teamwork, through great communication, through that sense of trust and loyalty. And, it's powerful, because if I give you that space and that environment to think how you would go about this yourself, then you're going to feel a lot more valued, a lot more responsible, a lot more accountable, and really want to embrace that. I want to prove that this is the way I'm going to do it. And that's taking risk as well, Trayton. As we're open to that risk. We mitigate it as best we can, but if you want to try something different, because all I'm asking you to do, and we know the intents that we have, deny, deter, destroy, defend, whatever it may be along those lines, but that would be the intent from the commander. I need you to deny this bridge for the next 24 hours. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but what I'm going to do is to get you to think about how you may wish to do it. And then what I love is that communication goes back up. Because even when I've given you that intent, you'll then go away and then come back to me perhaps later and say, right, this is what we're looking at doing. This is what we're thinking of doing. And that's not for me to criticize or judge. I'm going to think about it. But yourself, no tactic is, the right tactic. It's great if it works, but it doesn't always work.
Sure.
And that's the other thing I think is that adaptability to change is a huge one in the world that we came from originally. No plan survives contact, as we used to speak. So there's many
what
different
I'm noticing,
things.
Mark, is there's sort of three themes that I'm certainly finding interesting, and I'm sure our listeners hopefully are curious about. The first one, where you started off your, I guess, 32 years of experience of just talking with people, empathizing with people, understanding the context, understanding their situation, understanding the environment which they're operating and need to operating in. Yeah. And that's absolutely, as you say, we see that within coaching, understanding the, if you like, the arena in which that coaching is happening and the context and the system in which they're operating. And as you say, that's so important when we are coaching. The other thing I'm picking up, which I want to explore a little bit further, is that adaptability and that desire, which I think the Marines have it in bucket loads, is to want to play their best game. And having individuals that are already very coachable in what they do. And the other thing which I'd like to sort of blow the myth on this, if I may, because when I speak to a lot of individuals, certainly in the sort of commercial world, they say, oh, you're ex-military, it's command and control.
Yeah.
And there is an element of command and control, but my experience, and less than yours, only 12 years, but the way that a lot of military units work, they have to be agile and adaptable. And therefore coaching and helping people to think for themselves when the proverbial hits the fan, it's always been a key ethos and way, modus operandi of operating for military units. So those are the three things that I guess I'm picking up from what you've said, and would like to explore all three if we can. So a good coaching style, which one shall we start with, Mark?
Let's have a look at the adaptability.
Right.
Yeah, and I think adaptability is key because, as you know, we live in a world at the moment where there is constant change. And we're hearing from leaders and we're hearing from people that we've spoken to in organizations, Trayton, that change is constant. Leading in the new world is what we're talking about. Yeah. How do I, as a leader, prepare myself and my team and my people to, be ready to make these changes? And I think there's a great, people used to say that Darwin spoke about evolve or die, and we have to be very flexible and have to be able to adapt. I think in the business world, sometimes we have perhaps that little bit more time that we can make those changes. But as long as we communicate what those changes are well and ensure that our people understand why we're doing it, then we will get a much better sort of support and buy-in from them. What they want to know, isn't it, is why. Why are we changing? Because I'm so used to doing something in the way that we used to do it before. But adaptability in the Marines, for me, it came about very much through that, as you said, on mission or on change, or something happening within an organization, a new piece of equipment being brought in, a new tactic that we're going to use when we deployed. And people had this sort of growth mindset because we lived in an environment where most of our people expected change. We trained for change. We trained for different scenarios all the time in preparation for that. But even though we had trained for it, 9 times out of 10, it would be something that we never even thought about. Yeah. But we would try to, as we refer to as sort of red card it. Okay, if you're going to do this, what is the other person going to do? And then we'd have a separate team that would work on that sort of area, and it would make us then think differently. Okay, if this happens, then I may need to be able to sort of switch direction, split the team, or whatever that may be. And I think just having that as a mindset from my time served, I'm quite adaptable within business to change when required. It's not done because it's not something that's done to us. Change is something that's done to us, but transformation is our mindset and the way how we adapt to the situation that we're in.
And I think your point about in the military, things are always changing. The battlefield, it's always constantly changing, and there's surprises all the time. So I guess as not only in the training that we go through, but also within the battlefield, we're constantly change ready, and we're always adaptable, which I guess shows itself up in being coach ready as well.
Yes.
Coachee ready, I should say, readiness to be able to listen and notice things, where, sometimes the timelines within businesses, the change doesn't require imminent change. You've got a little bit of time. Where in the military, time is always for you. It's mainly against you, and the consequences of not changing or to adapting to that new situation, you're obviously fatal.
I think key in that as well, Trayton, as you said, when working with an individual, or could even be a team, couldn't it? That we come in usually as the coach, prepared for the session. Okay, this is what Trayton's going to talk about today. Probably this is something he's understand. We ask a question. What's on your mind today? What do you think? Whoa, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming. I thought we were going to be talking about transition. I thought we were going to be talking about your personal piece at the moment, but something has happened. But what that does is, because we are receptive to that, because all I'm doing is listening to understand. That's all I'm trying to do. All right, what is it Trayton's telling me? And within that conversation, not only is what he's telling me, but what does that mean in a more holistic sort of way? What is affecting you? So I think that is just, change is not a problem as long as you sort of manage that change and, are open to it. If we're very set in our ways, then, we're not going to move forward very quickly at all. We just need to be ready for that. And I think if that's something that you constantly have lived with, then it becomes something very easy to have in your normal sort of routine and expect.
And what sort of advice or guidance would you give someone you're coaching who wants to be more adaptable and more sort of resilient in the way that they deal with change and changes?
Yeah, and the big thing I always think for people is, Trayton, is don't take it personally. Change isn't, we're not asking you to be a different person or anything like that. We're just looking at maybe how we perform in a different way. And as we've said, if they understand the why, it's a bit like good salespeople. They talk about features and benefits. I always think about this. Well, this is the feature. That's great. Yeah, I've got a side view mirror. So what? What are the benefits from that? And if we can sort of instill that into the person to think about, there is change taking place. This is the feature. This is what's going to change. But, what could the benefits be, and why are we doing this? We're going to be more efficient, more productive. It will give you more time to do this. It will allow you to be able to achieve that. And if people, right, yeah, I get that now. Okay, so they will embrace it a little bit better, but it's got to be clear. It's great. What is it you want me to do? Well, they understand what, but where's that reason? Why?
I notice when working with people through change, they focus on the things that are being taken away rather than what they're being potentially given. And the sort of that they're constantly looking into. So what's in it for me? That what I call the Whitlam factor. what are the benefits for me? And sadly, with any change, when you want that benefit, there's got to be a little bit of effort. And if the effort is greater than the benefit, you're not going to make that effort. So you're absolutely right. It's about reinforcing the benefits and making sure with any change that there are benefits to individuals, to the team, to the organisation, obviously for society.
And that falls in, Trayton, as you mentioned, it's a little bit of challenge, isn't it? Okay, there's a bit of challenge in this. We've got to change, but the benefit and the outcome will be better for me, the team, the organisation eventually. And if you see that as the vision, this is going to improve something. And it's a bit like coaching, isn't it? That one-to-one where a person is trying to, think of how they can do something. And what we're doing is we're going to challenge them. So that challenge is key as well. Look, I'm going to take you outside of your comfort box a little bit, all right, to make you hopefully think of different things in different ways, different solutions that you may be able to bring to life. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm not going to give you the solution. I'm going to help you think through this. I'm a bit of a sounding board for you. And, and that there, they've got to adapt to that. And as you said, that adaptability that we've learned in the military is very much comes to life within coaching as well, because that person is having to adapt. I'm having to adapt, but not as much as they are, probably.
Yeah. And I think linking it back to the military environment, something that you desire and something you want in the longer term to move from A to B, you do have to work hard for it. And certainly, when I got my Green Beret, and I'm sure when you got yours, you were a very proud moment. You knew you worked hard for that. You'd had to change yourself. You've had to be adaptable and overcome, all of those hardships. But it was there, that was something to be proud of. And
then it started again, Trayton, day one when you joined the unit, didn't it?
Yeah, it's the same again, right? You got to adapt. And then day one when you're in operations, and then you get flown from an Arctic country to the jungle or to the desert, wherever that might be. It's about being adaptable and resilient to those certain things. But I guess there's an inner thing which something I try and build up within my coaches is building that inner confidence and helping them realize that they can do it. Rather than they can't do it.
Yeah.
And that sometimes takes time. And I think what the military are very good at, and I try to bring into my practice, is to build up that confidence as well as that competence in the world they're going to move into. And I do hear a lot of people saying, I can't do it. Whether that's imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence, whatever that might show up. But it's certainly something that I've learned in the military, that they are very good at building that confidence, building that trust, that camaraderie, that support network in place. And I'm glad to say that I'm starting to see that develop in a lot of leadership populations and within coaches, obviously, that we work with now, which is great.
And I think that, when you talk about building confidence, that takes time. We shouldn't think about, this huge goal, this huge target that we need to achieve. It's the little quick wins. How do I help that person get there? What are the short-term wins? What are the quick-term wins that, that's a smaller, easier, achievable goal for me.
Yeah.
And if I achieve that, all of a sudden, I get a sense of, I am capable. I can do it. Okay, I'm going to let's have a go at the next little step. What else can I do on my journey to get to that vision, that place where I want to be, where my real goal is? And if we do it in small steps and chip away, I always used to say, if we're trying to bring a wall down one brick at a time, don't try and bring the whole wall down in one go. Let's chip away at this.
Yeah.
And so that we don't become sort of fatigued or drained, or, let's go through this systematically in a way and build up, but understand what that is on that journey.
And I think the other key part for me on this journey, Mark, and you just highlighted it really nicely, is it's not just about getting the individual to believe in themselves. And when you achieve that and they achieve that for themselves, that's just a brilliant feeling, because then they start taking lots of bricks out and you can't keep up with them, which is amazing. That's why I do the coaching. I think the other thing I've learned, not just in the military, but in the 25 years I've been coaching, is you've got to believe in the coachee as well. You've got to believe in their talent and their potential. And if you don't have that, then you're sort of on the back foot. And I think the coachee will pick up on that. So not only developing the belief in themselves, but you believing in them as well. And I say so much in society today, and the people I work with, so much latent potential that, I just want to grab and help to really unlock and unleash that brilliance. And that's what I get excited about, within the coaching world.
And I think that's really key, isn't it? Is that the coachee sitting on the other side there is saying, good creep. Trayton actually believes in me. He thinks I am very good. He thinks I've got more potential. And that just gives them a sense of that, wow, maybe I'm not as bad as what I thought I was. He's telling me I can, please, what's your ideas? How can you go about this? How would you do this? I know one of the first things I always used to ask on any operation, any mission, always, no matter what level, from a 4-man team to, sergeant majors of the brigade, what would you do? What are you thinking about? What have you done before? What have you seen? Get their ideas first. I'm not going to go straight in with my ideas. Okay, I hear you. I listened to that. That's, really impressed by that thought. This is what I'm thinking. How do we bring this all together? Because all of a sudden they're in. It's not a one-way system. It's not me telling them. Yeah. This is the intent. This is the mission. This is what we have to do. And I think some of this comes down to what your third point was about that command and control, which everybody, and I tell you what, it almost airs on the back of my neck go up sometimes when I hear that. Military command and control, told what to do. And I'm like, because you possibly don't really understand what that environment really is like. Yeah. Yes, there is a time and a place where command and control, we talk about a commanding leader or an authoritative leader. It's in that time of crisis. It's in that time when the chips are really down and everybody's looking over the shoulder for Mark or for Trayton to give them the direction right now, and that's when we use command and control to a degree. It's that critical moment, but on the whole, what I love in the military is that mission command that you and I both understand. And, if anybody wishes to further understand, read, Stephen Bungey's Art of Action. It's a great story about how you can bring sort of mission command into organizations and instill that sort of ethos that we have. And as I said, we would work very much from the very man at the top. Whether it's a brigade commander on operations, this is my intent, which would go to the commando units, go to, the supporting assets. And that message just filters down through. And at every level, we're not directed. This is the intent. This is what we need to achieve. Go make it happen, so to speak. Go and prepare your own orders to filter. And then we go back up. And then, at the very senior level, they'll go back to the brigade commander. This is what we're going to do to try and achieve your intent. This is the courses of actions that we have, and they would get their buy-in from that. But I think that mission command piece and what you've just spoken into is absolutely critical, Mark, in that it's about leaders giving the intent, the strategic direction, where they want to place their main effort. How people go then and achieve that is entirely up to the leaders on the ground and the individuals. And you're absolutely right. It's commonplace to have conversations. What do you think? Are there any other ideas? Have you done this before? I guess in that non-directive approach, just seeing what's available, not just with the coachee, but with the coachees, those section or that unit or whatever it is you're doing. And then bringing a good leader will bring all of that knowledge together and then collaborate to find the best answer. Definitely. And not only do you get the best answer, you then get buy-in, and people are motivated because they understand the what and the why, and they feel included in that decision making, and they know why they've got to implement some pretty challenging tasks. And key within that, Trayton, is, in an organisation, whatever that intent may be, how can the leader, how can the CEO have his, finger on the pulse in every department, every team that exists, because there are different things happening within that organisation that he or she will never know about at that time. Yeah. So they've got to be given that autonomy to be able to think and adapt on their feet, because if he tries or she tries to say, this is what you're going to do. Well, all right, I may be based in another country. I could be based in another location in the UK in my team. I've now got to pass it. Well, what you've asked me to do is not now possible. But by giving them the intent, and what you're saying to them is think on your feet, adapt, prepare, and I trust you. I value your opinion. Intellectual disobedience is something else we used to talk about. If if you don't agree with what we're saying, let me know and tell me. I am going to tell you that I don't necessarily agree with what it is that you are talking about doing. However, there is a point in the military very much where we would don't agree, but if that's your direction, then we will do this. We'll make it happen as best as we can. That good followership piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, the mission commands really, I value it, and I like to think that in my own team here that's the way that I sort of work. This is what we've got to achieve. I'm not checking to see what they've done or looking over the shoulder every now. I'm there if you need a bit of support, but I'm also there for that conversation with them in a coaching style. Well, what are you thinking about doing? What could you do? How could you do this?
I think it's really important to bring in at this point the conversation, because I think it reinforces what the military have done. Specifically, we're talking from the Royal Marines, because that's both our backgrounds. But 25 years ago when I left, my last role was to develop a coaching academy at Lympstone, because we identified that young Marines were thinking for themselves, and we wanted to understand why they were being innovative and creative to solve problems, without that direction. And as you know, we worked with Plymouth University and identified that it was coaching. This was 25 years ago. Coaching was very young there. And Lympstone, and which is the Commando Training Centre, and other centres of excellence have developed that mindset. And it shows up in, the operations they go in. They can be empathetic, they can be aggressive if they need to be, but they know how to act and how to solve problems for people, for regions, for countries in a way which is very effective and efficient. And that wouldn't come, that ability to be agile and adaptive wouldn't come if it was just command and control.
There's some great points in there, T. And the first one is, when coaching, and as you said, you were very instrumental in sort of bringing this to life within the Royal Marines, even just through that sort of, okay, look, I'm seeing this happen. Why are my Marines, when I ask them, right, we've already got it, already done it? Because we gave them that space and we gave them that trust that they were proactive rather than reactive.
I guess giving them time to think, Mark, is, and having the confidence from leaders that they are able to share their views and to challenge, that challenging debate that you spoke about. I think you called it intellectual challenge.
Intellectual disobedience. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's so, there was a psychological safety, literally. There was a little bit of banter if you said something that was a little bit,
sure.
But that was part of the humour. But I think having that ability to be able to have free speech, and certainly it wouldn't be available in a command and control, an authoritative environment. And I think the military get it very right with the authority, but with the empowerment and alignment and trust in people to deliver, whether that's on a local or a global level. I think they do a great job within that.
It came back to me, T, apologies for that, the coaching piece. And I was saying, I know when this was first talked about in the Marines, my time in 83, I don't like to say this, but there was probably a little bit more of a train out sort of policy that we used to have. Let's make this as hard as we possibly can. And we're not going to suffer any fools gladly or anything like that. And unfortunately, not hit the mark. Whereas now, as we know, we were part of the longest mandatory training in the world, or a training that a recruit goes through, and that's not changed. It's still there. So coaching is what do we need?
And as you and I know, Mark, it's so easy sadly to break someone individually, physically or mentally. There's no skill in doing that. Any fool can do that. And I think what the military, certainly at Lympstone, do is they coach for performance because they see the potential, and it is very much about train in rather than train out individuals, and that ethos and that way of operating continues in operations. And I think, I know it creates an environment where people want to support each other. They want to work hard and play their best game for each other.
And actually, the coaching piece, Drayton, and you saw that, in the physical side as a physical training instructor, and I worked within the rehab side as well for what was called Hunter Company at the time, which was all the men that were injured through training. And because of the intensity of our training and duration, the 9-month program, it was not financially effective for us to just return people to civilian street, which is what happened in a lot of the other sort of armed forces.
Yeah.
And so we invested time into our people, whether it was through injury or whether it was through failing a commando test or a requisite test to get to the commando phases. And through our ability of coaching, within the physical training branch, and I know this happened within, whether it's a weapons branch or a mortars branch, enabling people to be the best they can at what they specialize in. But for me, in the training environment, it was about getting these people, what are the barriers? What's stopping you from getting to the 30-foot rope climb with 35-pounder kit on? You can do it in 6 sessions building up to it. And then all of a sudden it comes to test day when it's test day and you spend the night before up, you're worried about his test. It's my driving test. It's my, I've got a presentation to deliver tomorrow. What's getting in the way? Yeah. And through that conversation that you could have with these young men and young women now, I'm sure that you could, let's talk about this. Let's bring this to life. What is really stopping you? What is getting in the way? And having that conversation with them, as opposed to you need to do this, you need to do that. Okay, yeah, I'm responsible for this. I can do it. I've done it many, many times before, but it's just under these conditions that I find it difficult. How do we take that condition away? How do we get you to think that this isn't a test condition? Again, just having that conversation with people, no matter what. And there are many different scenarios, as whether it's an injury they can't get over at the time, or whether it's a run or a climb or a yomp or something like that. Same in the business. Whether we're struggling to do an ISO, whether we're struggling to do this, we'll get there. Nothing's impossible. It will take a bit of time. And as long as we manage that sort of expectation and help people go through that, we can get there.
Yeah. And I think, sadly, time's getting the better of us, Mark, here. And we could talk forever, and we should do another podcast. I hope our listeners are realizing there's a lot from the military world, which the military have learned from, which has certainly been, in my time, 25 years ago, developed from a place of leadership coaching, and has built on that to deliver great performance in different parts of the world for different reasons. And I think there's some good learning that corporations can gain from that military learning. So before we close, I have a question which I ask all my guests.
Sure.
And I know this is it's our purpose, coaching focused purpose, which is coaching for a better tomorrow. So I'd love to hear your perspective of what coaching for a better tomorrow means to you.
Well, I really love this phase. And the reason I love this is because for me, it's all encompassing. People talk about coaching. It's a one-to-one. It's an hour and a half session. It's you and me, or me and that other person that are in a room. No, it's not. For me, coaching for a better tomorrow is how I engage with people. How do I communicate? And listening is not something that I'm not going to say I wasn't particularly good at. I wasn't skilled in it in any shape or form, but I really now understand the value of it. And my conversations with my own family, my friends, are very different than I ever used to have before. And I can see how that sort of transpires and how it's brought to life in my own children. I have 2 daughters that, my conversation in a car with them, my conversation during the day, my end of day routine with my wife when I go home is, more about that. How's it been going? What's been going on today and all that. And I do get that, stop coaching me. I'm just trying to understand what it is that you're going on. So coaching for a better tomorrow, please. I would say that, for anybody, it's about our communication skills. It's about how well we listen and we give people that space and autonomy to be able to use us as a sounding board for us to listen. We're not listening to respond. We're listening to understand what's going on for them. And I think not only through whether we're using this within business, but using it, as I said, in our own social environment, our own family environment. Better tomorrow. Have those moments. There's moments every day that we probably miss, which are coachable moments. Something you see, something you may have heard, where you could ask a simple question to just help people think through what it is that you may have seen or heard them do. So for me, it encompasses everything. I don't think of it as just coaching. I think of it as that if we all communicated in a better way, then no matter where we're doing this, within our own personal life, within our own environment, then it will improve people's lives, definitely.
And create a better tomorrow, which I'm sure all our listeners want. So, Marc, thank you. As ever, a real pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience, and I look forward to the next time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trayton. Much appreciated.